Well, hello to everyone, and welcome to the Living Your Best Life webinar series presented by the Huntsman World Senior Games. This is a monthly webcast that focuses on a wide variety of topics that are designed to help you live your best life. My name is Kyle Case, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the Games. Now, on to our expert presenter. Richard and Kaylie Fritzler entered hospice and palliative care industry because of some very personal experiences that they had at the end of their loved ones' lives. They were presented with some pretty difficult choices and didn't know how to navigate these uncharted waters. And so they started the Pathways Hospice and Palliative Care business to help people navigate through their own difficult journeys. And this is a time that can be very, very difficult. So they've been able to draw upon some of their own personal experiences and help people kind of work their way through that. Welcome to Richard and Kaylie. Thank you guys for joining us.
Well, thank you for having us. It is exciting to be here on this program and have this opportunity to share our experiences with everybody, across the country and across the world.
So, well, thank you. And I know you're going to get into some of your personal experiences, and we look forward to hearing them and learning from the experiences that you've had, both personally as well as those clients and customers that you've been able to have. This is a difficult conversation. It's one that many times we don't want to have. Just to get us started and get us rolling, how do you approach people and express the importance of planning ahead, even though, boy, we don't want to talk about these kinds of things?
Well, what we find is that nobody becomes aware of the term, and that was our experience with my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, was we really didn't know what the term was, and we didn't know how it applied.
So what term? Hospice and palliative care.
Yeah.
And that it's a scary word when you hear it because it has a stigma attached to it. And most of us throughout the country, throughout the world, kind of think, oh, that's at the very, very end of life. But I have great news. Medicare actually has this really incredible private program that was not intended for just the last 5 to 13 days, but it really was intended for a longer period of time to offer you an opportunity to live your very best life for as long as you live. And the palliative and hospice program will come in and lift the burdens and make your life a little bit easier. That was the real intent of it. It's not always used that way. Often it's used just as those last couple of weeks of life and pain management, but it can be so much more.
Well, and it really should be, because if all we do is manage pain, then yes, there's nothing good about hospice. I mean, it's less bad. But there are some great things, and some of the experiences we've had with families and people that we've been able to care for are just so exciting to tell and to show how we can change lives. And so that's really what we're looking at. In fact, to start, we had a patient that had been suffering from a debilitating lung disease. And she, her doctors said, we've done all that we can do. It might be time for you to start looking at these end-of-life options. And her daughter had been a CNA for a short period of time at a hospice in, another part of the country. Yeah. And so she had her own personal experiences there. And her sole goal was to find a hospice where the nurses were nice. That was all she expected.
And they keep her involved because she wasn't in the same city as her parents.
So she had intended on calling every hospice and making that decision. And as we talked to her and started explaining how we wanted to do things differently than what had been done here, and we started describing some of the things that we saw as limitations that shouldn't be here and ways that we can adjust that, she said, okay, so I think I want you to come talk to my parents. And we did. And we talked to them and we explained what the potential was, and they said, yes, we will sign up for hospice with you. And we did. We signed them up. And over the next few weeks, as we're conversing with them and trying to find out the things that make them happy, the things that are most important for them.
We like to call that their palliative,
right,
because it's dynamic and personal.
Right. As we started finding that out, we found she was just concerned. She had this anxiety issue, just an overwhelming anxiety. And if you've had hospice experience in the past, you know that hospice can provide drugs to address anxiety, which is an option. However, we wanted to give her more options. And so we just started asking what that anxiety was. And my wife will tell this story much better than I do. her anxiety was about her husband not being able to take care of himself.
Right. What we really discovered through trying to find out what their palliative was and how we could lighten their burdens and make their life a little bit better was that she had always been the caregiver for her husband. She made sure that dinner was on the table at 6 o'clock when he got home every night, and the bills were paid, and the house was cleaned, and the children were raised. And he went out and made the living and brought home the bacon. Well, she couldn't imagine him trying to live his life without her. And of course, his response was, honey, I've run multi-million-dollar corporations. I'm going to be just fine. But that concern of leaving him on his own to
Eating at McDonald's every day
was just really daunting. So in her case, we came back as we call it an IDG team, as a team, palliative care team. We collaborated to discuss what we thought we could do to help make their load a little bit lighter. We put together a really simple meal plan book that had some easy recipes with pictures in it that you could follow. We created a weekly meal plan, and we went over for several weeks where we talked to him about just pick out 7 recipes. Here's the list of ingredients that you still need. You can send that off to one of the grocery stores who will deliver it. And then every day we'll make these new meals. At first, his first response was, I don't need that. And of course we said,
it's not for you.
It's not for you.
You're just going to play along because this is for your wife. We're trying to resolve her anxiety. But as he starts looking through the meals and says, well, yeah, that does look pretty good. And yeah, I could do that. And it's just expanding the range of things. We all get in the habit of just eating the same things, but he got excited about just some other things that he could get excited, that he could eat. And he started trying to make these meals, and with our help, he got a lot better. His wife had said, at first, he couldn't cut a carrot without it flying all over the room. And then as he started really getting into it and enjoying this, and at the time that he's in the kitchen cooking, she's there and they're having this conversation. It's actual shared time. And so he gets pretty good at it. In fact, he gets to the point where he's plating the meals.
Bringing her flowers.
He's wiping off the rim and putting it on placemats. And
little sprigs of parsley on the side, all that stuff.
He's loving that. Well, a few months later, we're talking to the wife, and she was quite excited.
One of the things that she said is, I really should have done this 20 years ago. He is not only enjoying it, but we're spending so much good quality time together that they rekindle the relationship that sadly had gone a little bit stale. And all of a sudden, day in and day out, they were, laughing together and truly enjoying their moments. I think the important part of understanding, what your palliative is realizing that as adults, palliative is very dynamic. We've all, had experiences, and we all have different personalities, and what one likes is different than what somebody else likes. So it's very difficult just to put it in a brochure. So you're not going to get your answers as you're doing your research unless you truly call companies and say, what is your palliative program? What are you going to bring to me that is different than somebody else? And most people don't realize that they have that right. They wait patiently for their doctor to
recommend hospice. But let me say that I think the word palliative may be uncommon for people. So let's take a couple of minutes and go through that. Palliative can be a very dynamic definition. If we start with the simplest, and that is that of all the things that we can do for a disease or illness, there is a small group of things that can cure it, right? And then everything else that we might do that helps us feel better or address a symptom or reduce an issue, those are all palliative. So if we use a cold, a common cold, a pretty simple example, nothing cures a cold. So everything is palliative, okay? So now we're just talking about the palliative side. If I asked you, Kyle, what were the best things that made you feel the best when you were down with a cold or the flu? Was it a drug, or was it tucked in bed and chicken soup?
Soup, right? It's chicken soup.
Your mom's hugs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those are the kind of things. So there's the clinical side. If we just stay in the clinical, yes, there are some solutions that can work, but trying to spread out and look at other alternatives that can do significantly more and add to that. And it's proven over and over again that good palliative has a massive improvement on people's outcome in everything if we add that into the mix.
In fact, it can actually extend life, because as stresses are reduced, not only are our quality of life increased, but the time that we have on this earth can be increased. I think most of us realize that as we start into a heavy drug regimen, which is why people usually fear hospice, is they expect it to be a heavy drug regimen at the very, very end. It seems like our life passes before we're ready.
Yeah.
So if you can take the opportunities to have a higher quality of life, and to take, this is exactly what we're talking about, take control of your own life and your own medical condition, and make sure that you are being provided with things that will improve your life while you're here on this earth. It will extend your life.
And if we go back to that story, one of the biggest important things to take away from that story with that lady with lung disease, instead of giving her drugs that just put her to sleep, she was able to be awake and involved and participating in life, and she enjoyed it. And so again, when we're talking about hospice, and if we just look at a definition of hospice as we're going to manage the circumstances until the end, instead of trying to redirect and find great things to enjoy and do, it's a world of difference. And so that's what we're trying to implement here. There are other areas of the country and the world where they do a better job of hospice and integrate palliative care.
And that's why we're here.
Yeah,
we're trying to tell you what to look for and what to ask for. You're entitled to it. And as your own best medical advocate, you have a right to ask for it. And you should. And you
Right.
should shop around, and you should find out what is being offered. Most people don't look at home health and hospice and palliative care as something that we are all competing for the business.
Right.
So you're in control. You have a lot of choice. You have a lot of options. And as the beneficiary, you should be asking for, what a company's going to give you over what another company is going to provide.
I love it. I love it. You guys have definitely already widely expanded my concept and my idea of what palliative care and hospice care is. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn the rest of the program over to you guys, and then I'll jump back on at the end, and we can dig into some questions that people are going to have. Okay?
All right. We look forward to that. So when we're talking about hospice and palliative care, we really are talking about being your own best medical advocate. And Kaylie used that phrase, being a participant in your medical care, not just a bystander or even a spectator, but actually being involved. And there are plenty of things that you can do to be that involved person and get better outcome. I mean, if we just tie it into the Senior World Games concept, if you're on the team and actively participating, the team will do better than if you're just standing on the sidelines waiting for it to be over. And I don't want to sound too harsh with that phrase, but so really be involved. And there are plenty of ways that you can do that. One of the first and easiest for everybody today, if you are using medications, you should gather all those together, find out what they are, and find out why they're being used. Look for the goal for that, and we'll go through that, and then have a conversation with your doctor about it.
And remember, things have changed over the years. We used to just go to a primary care physician, and we trusted that he knew our entire medical history. And we had relationships with our doctors. But things have changed. Insurance companies have come in and kind of changed the way that physicians do business. Quite often, a primary care physician can have 2,300 patients. So while he might remember that your child studied abroad or went to school at MIT, he might have forgotten that he took your gallbladder out 5 years ago. So you have to advocate and keep track of your own medical history.
That number 2,300 seems like a lot, although on a per physician basis, normally it's 18 to 2,300. 1,800 patients are on his rolls that he's seeing actively or passively or not seeing at all, but he's dealing with 1,800 people or more, 2,300. So the question is what can he really remember about you? He's a nice guy. He knows you to a certain extent, but the things that are probably most important to you are the things that he forgets. He's providing medical care for thousands of people every every month or so he may forget most or a part of your medical history.
And we all know he looks at the chart right before he comes into the room and kind of, brushes over the summaries. But does he remember the minutia? Which is another thing that's really important that has changed in the healthcare industry. We have specialists. So nothing is just left to our primary care physician anymore. We have heart specialists and kidney specialists, and we have orthopedic surgeons and neurologists. We have a number of specialists. So if we have different specialists that are seeing us and providing medications, does our primary care physician gather all that information and review it every time we came in?
Well, no, he doesn't. And that information is lost. And that's one of the things just on our simple first task of checking your meds. If you've got 3 or 4 doctors prescribing medications for you, they may be prescribing different medications to try and address the same issue. Those medications may not be working well together. And until you get your entire your medication history together and have that reviewed by somebody or each and every doctor, you won't know what that best practice is. So again, that first simple step, just gather your medications together, get an idea of how they work for you and what they're supposed to do, and then talk to each of your doctors.
And I don't know if you know this or not, but you can go online and we provide this to all of our beneficiaries. Anybody really can call us and we're happy to provide it. There are little forms that you can fill out and write all your medications down. You really should take that with you every time you go to a doctor's office. Even if you go to a podiatrist, they are interested in what medications you're on. That will also allow them to have the information available if they're going to prescribe somebody some more medication. True story. We had a patient that came on to service with us, and when we looked at her medical profile, she was on 23 medications. She had terrible dementia. She was falling all the time, and that could be expected. I mean, this is a woman that was almost 90 years old, and she had been diagnosed with dementia, and she had kidney failure, and she had chronic UTIs, and a lot of illnesses that would contribute to that. So while that wasn't unexpected, the first thing we did was take her medication profile. We went over it in our IDG team, and our medical professional looked through it and said, okay, she's on 5 different pain medications. By the way, she's on 3 different blood pressure medicines and a number of other things that didn't really work well together. So we were able to change her medication profile, go back to the patient and offer her, the information that we had discovered.
Can I just interject? She wasn't experiencing any pain. She was on 5 pain meds, but she didn't have any pain. She never said she was in pain.
Well, anymore. But they had resolved the problem, but her pain or her medication profile hadn't been reviewed. So once we took that back to her and we talked about the pain, all the medications that she was on, we were actually able to drop her down to 3 medications.
From 21.
That's it. 23.
23.
3 medications. That was it. So in the end, believe it or not, she graduated from hospice in a really good way. Her kidneys started to function better. Her scores and palliative scores started to improve. Her dementia started to diminish. Now, I'm not saying that happens all the time. That is the exception. The point of it is, even before you're on hospice, it's important to take control, be your own best medical advocate, and keep that medication profile with you and require your doctors to review it. And by the way, if you go to your primary care and one of the medications is from your heart doctor, he's not likely to remove that medication or really even consult with him. He will give you information and you will be required to go between the doctors to make sure that your profile is the best for you. That's what being your own best medical advocate is.
Right. So if we do that and you talk to each of your doctors, you may find that some of those drugs aren't necessary anymore, may not be as effective as they used to be. Again, when you have 3 or 4 doctors prescribing things and each of them have a negative effect. One thing about drugs is they're not all positive. There are some downsides. And those downsides may be causing other problems. I mean, If your circulation is bad in your feet and your podiatrist is checking that, but you have drugs that actually reduce your circulation, that's not helpful. But if there isn't anybody having a conversation, if all we're doing is allowing doctors to stay within their little scope and nobody's playing the team manager in this case, then we're not going to be playing well together. So if you as a patient can just take that lead and start asking the questions and bring information, not only about your drugs, but about your own condition. If you're on a drug, you should know why, and then you should be able to relate to the doctor whether or not it's actually working for that, so that you can have that open conversation.
And a point Richard brought up before is sometimes you're given a medication and it's ongoing and you have constant, when they reissue it.
Yeah, new prescriptions, just a reissue prescription over and over again. Just refills.
Refills.
Yeah.
Such an easy
Sometimes
word.
we get tripped up on the hard medical words.
Yeah, right. And you have refills coming. You need to have that medication profile reviewed often because you may no longer require that medication. And you'd be surprised at how many times people are on medications for a long time and they haven't needed them any longer for a year. So they're no longer benefiting you. In fact, could be hurting you. So big point. Make sure you take control by having your medications reviewed.
Now, we realize that for a lot of people, this is an uncomfortable thing to say, well, I should be trusting my doctor. You are. Just like any of your trusted team members, you're depending on them for all of their input. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't have help from anywhere else. I think on any team sport, we're all trying to communicate what we see. And so you're right there in the middle of it. So be involved in that. I don't want to push this analogy too far, but it really is. If you're a player, you have an opportunity for success. If you're a spectator, you're just paying the price for the game. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
And you know your body works better than
Yes.
anybody else. So don't take, oh, you're fine for, the word, the end result. If you still don't feel fine, push on. You follow your intuition. You follow what your body is saying to you. And you ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You have the right to do that.
And that takes us really to this next point of you should be looking for alternatives that may work for you. Realize that not everything works for everybody in the same way. If that was the case, there would only be one blood pressure medication. There would only be one cholesterol medication. Everybody responds differently just within the medication area, but we also want to look at that palliative side and other alternatives that may be there. And pain is a great example. We've had, a history of pain being treated with drugs, and those drugs aren't necessarily effective in that. So are there alternatives? And what we found in dealing with hospice and those people who have pain, many times massage is a great option to help really alleviate pain, at least for a period of time. Much more effective than just a continuing course of drugs. And massage doesn't have a downside. The downsides for painkillers, being blunt here, having problems with bowel movements and constipation is real. And that can become a true hazard. So when we're really logging in, a lot of pain meds, we usually notice that our bodies aren't processing the same. So if we have ways of solving that, so we're not creating more problems, so much the better.
If you are ever given an opioid, immediately ask for the bowel protocol. I know it's awkward and uncomfortable, but that should be the next question. You're given an opioid, what's the bowel protocol? Because there will be a regimen that's supposed to follow.
Well, okay, so if we're talking about opioids specifically, they are intended to be short-term generally. So you should find out what you're expecting the benefit of this to be, how long you expect that problem is going to exist, and when you're going to be getting off of this med. And if the doctor doesn't have an answer, then he needs more information. He needs you to be able to share with him the changes that you have in your feelings when it doesn't hurt as much. You need to let your doctor know, because he's going to allow you to continue down that same path with the drug, and the drug doesn't do you any good. It just addresses a problem that doesn't exist. We had a patient with 5 painkillers because every doctor at some point in her history said, well, yes, I can give you a painkiller for that, and didn't have an end to that. So it's important on every medication to really understand that.
Which, again, every one of you should be asking a number of questions whenever you go into your doctor's office. And it gets intimidating, and we forget often what those questions are when we get there. So write them down. And I know you've heard that before, but you really need to do that. Throughout the week before you go to the doctor, start writing down all your questions. And when you get in there, Don't leave until you have the answers to all of those questions. If you need help with what those questions can be, it's amazing the plethora of information that is available on the internet, or call our office. We're happy to give you lists of questions that will relate and pertain to your specific diagnoses or procedure that you're facing. So make sure that you ask a lot of questions. Some of those questions, one of the things that Richard brought up, how long am I going to have this problem? How long, if it's a procedure, what's my expected outcome? Oh, this is a great point. Ask for your medical records. And here's a really, really important point. Make sure when you ask for your medical records to always ask for
your doctor's narratives and your plan of care. Understand that there are effectively 4 types of medical records. You have your test results. We can all understand what that is. That's a blood sample or a urine sample, and that gets given to the doctor. That's a set of documents. We have a clinical assessment that is done, and that's where the doctor takes that medical information, and then they look at you and add some information to that. But those 2 parts you should get copies of, and generally you will. If you ask for medical records, you'll get that. But the more important things are the doctor's narrative. That's where your doctor is telling himself. He is going through the details that he thinks is important and how this should be addressed. And then he's developing a plan of care. Those are the 2 things that really matter to you.
When we were learning about narratives, one of the things, explanations for a narrative is paint yourself a picture so that the person in another country could read it and almost visualize what you're talking about and the person that you're describing. Why is that so important? Because if a doctor is drawing a picture for himself so that he can go back in his memory and bring forward those memories of your last visit, he's going to put things in there like his opinions of things, his if this doesn't work, this will be the next step. All those things that he doesn't want to forget. So do not ask for your medical records without including doctor's narratives and plan of care. It's huge. You will be surprised at some of the information that you'll find there.
What we found recently is that the medical protocol for conditions is to downplay everything or to not mention it at all. In fact, my daughter is going to medical school, and she had a professor who came into the room and said, okay, so if we have a patient who presents with an inoperable brain tumor, what do you tell them? How do you explain that to them? And he let the class explain whatever they're going to explain. Then he gave them the answer that the medical profession has. And that answer is
nothing. We can't do anything about it. So why take away their hope, and why frustrate them with dealing with something that they can't do anything about?
So don't tell them about it. Don't let them know it's there because there's nothing that can fix it. Now, I can see both sides. My wife is very adamant that she would want to know, and I get that. I would want to know too, but I also understand there are people who wouldn't deal well with that information, that it would be debilitating for them to come to that realization. You have to be in a position to be able to make that decision for yourself. Are you somebody who would want to know so that you can make the best plan for whatever it is? And that's where, again, a good hospice plan where we can come up with ways to make life the most enjoyable for as long as we live. That's important, but you don't have to be on hospice to make those decisions for yourself.
Home health, or just going to the doctor's office in general. Those things are really important. I mean, for me, I guess what bothers me about that response is if I'm in here for an MRI, then it means I want to know what's going on. So tell me everything and let me decide how to deal with it. I get it. We're not all the same. And so maybe you don't want to ask, but I would ask very specific questions. Did you find anything? Is there anything there that I should know about? You'd be surprised how much more information you will receive when you actually express that you're not afraid to know. And I do understand the other side. I do understand the other side. I mean, we have this wonderful cancer doctor, and I've argued with him a little bit about, you should tell everybody, they should know. But I understand his point. If you take away their hope or you take away their fight, they may not be ready for the fight. And sometimes fighting to live is all you've got to hope for. And it's incredible how long the will to live can last. It can extend your life. Now, me, I'm kind of give me the information. I might mourn for a day and then let me beat those odds. I'll show you what I can do. But not everybody's like that. So know what information you want to know and know what you don't want to know. And if you're not strong enough to hear it, maybe send in your husband.
Yeah, find somebody who can be that person that you're willing to allow to advocate for you. Understand that another common practice, best practice for medical right now is to never deny somebody a treatment, even if that treatment is going to be beneficial. And certainly some aggressive treatments that we can think of, radiation and chemotherapy, they have a place. However, at some point, they become less effective or ineffective. And in fact, they get to the point where they are detrimental. The problem is that because the medical community doesn't want to be the information source, they want to allow people to have hope. They may provide those types of things to people who it would do no good and in fact be very harmful just because that's where we're at. So be your own medical advocate, understand what those can do, what they can't do, have a frank conversation with your doctor. I believe that if your doctor knows what you want, he will help you get there. If he knows you want to make better decisions about your healthcare and not just be on the healthcare train, but know when the seventh round of chemotherapy probably isn't going to do me any good, so why don't I stop that? And instead of just getting to the point where I feel better and go under the chemo again, just say, okay, so I'm going to feel better, and then I'm going to feel better for as long as I can, and then it'll be done. Those are the kind of decisions that you're going to have to make at some point. If you want your doctor's help with that, and we hope you do, engage him, be involved, help him understand what your goals are.
Yeah, express your goal. Really express your goal. That's really important. If your goal is a higher quality of life for as long as you can live, then say that and be willing to express, look, if this chemotherapy is just going to make me sick for a week and just about the time that I'm starting to feel better again, you're going to give me another round. Tell me that. And don't be afraid to ask if this is a financial decision for the business over your personal best interest. Let's be honest. It's a healthcare industry, right? And they're businesses. And some businesses are motivated more by the money. And they kind of become a little bit hard to the person on the other side of the table. I hate to say that. Not every doctor's like that. But make sure you ask that question just so that you have the peace of mind of knowing that you're doing what's best for you and not what's best for the company on the other side of the table.
And these shouldn't be uncomfortable conversations to have with your doctor because there are many different drugs that can be used for chemotherapy. Some of them are more effective. Some of them are equally effective. Some of them are not as effective, depending on the type of cancer. But is the question about effectiveness or profitability or convenience? Because some of them are harder to do. And so if you at least know what the aspects of that are, you can advocate for yourself. You can negotiate possibly a different protocol that may be not quite as common for this practice, but may be more effective for you. We're not saying that this is easy. Bad health is not a walk in the park. It is hard. It is taxing. It is overwhelming. But if you don't have a plan, then it's even worse. So if you can build a plan and be a participant, then you can start to see through this and get a lot more out of it.
I don't think we told our stories. So why did we start this business? Many years ago, about 18 years ago now, my parents were living in another state, and Richard and I had young children, and we had our own businesses that were keeping us very, very busy. And I had 5 young kids that were keeping me very, very busy at home. So when my mom got sick, we actually brought her to our home, and my dad, we brought them to my home where we could take care of them. Really not expecting my mom to pass away. We just thought she was just really struggling with some bronchitis and that she was going to get better and, we'd take care of her and send her home. Well, shortly after she arrived, we discovered that my mom had terminal lung cancer, and it had already metastasized to her liver, her lymph nodes, and her brain. And when we were told, the doctor was very direct with us and said that
Painfully direct, actually.
And every day she's living is a gift. Take her home and just enjoy every moment you have, because we really can't believe she's still alive. Statistically, she should have already passed. So that was our first experience with hospice and palliative care. And can I just tell you that the palliative care company, I say that word first because the company that came to us was absolutely incredible. They came in and talked to all of us, our entire family. They wanted to know not only what my mom's goals were, but they wanted to know how they could help us, and how they could make our life a little easier. So while they couldn't pay for everything, because my mom was actually very non-traditional, she was very homeopathic, they helped us find the resources for everything that she wanted to try. So here, my mother was only supposed to live, days, maybe a couple of weeks. We had time with the wonderful palliative care that we received to have family come all the way from England to spend time with her. We tried things like massage therapy and foot zoning. We even tried this thing with a ball that went into water, and it was supposed to draw poisons from your feet, toxins from your feet.
And it works better for those that believe in it than those who don't.
And she was a huge believer, and she did really, really well. She ended up living 5 months, 5 days, and it was really a beautiful experience, because that whole time we were serving her, brothers and sisters had time to come in and spend time with her. We all had time to deal with what was about to happen. We mourned before she was gone. We had an opportunity to discuss fears about dying, or wishes and goals. It was just an absolutely beautiful experience.
And she had her own goals and wishes, and she let people know that. And that's the important part, is let people know what you want. And because of that, we were able to provide care that was a little different, but more tuned to what she wanted. She actually went the whole 5 months and 5 days without medications.
Yeah, she died without a single dose of morphine, Halidol, lorazepam, nothing. And she was completely pain-free. But the truth is, she would have told us at the point that she wanted pain medications, because that's what we have to remember. It is all about the patient's and the family's decision, not the caregivers coming in. So if you're with a company that comes in and says, this is what we're going to do, and this is protocol, and this is the regimen, you need to speak up and advocate for yourself. That is not the way Medicare intended it. You have an absolute right to choose. You are supposed to be a part of the plan of care. Very often, you don't even hear that word, plan of care. So you should say, I want to be a part of the plan of care. I want to make the decisions. I don't want anyone coming into my home or coming into my parents' rehabilitation room, or the facility where they're living, and making decisions without consulting me.
You should be your own best medical advocate. And that's the second story that we have, because 15 years after that, my father-in-law had his own medical conditions that didn't look real good. And he was in a facility recovering from a surgery because of neuropathy, where he didn't feel a wound on his foot, and it had gotten bad, so they amputated a portion of his foot.
Well, and we were going to move up here because our life had changed. Internet had changed. My kids were older, and we were able to do our business out of our home. So we were moving up here to take care of him, with the intent of later putting him on hospice.
When that became appropriate. The recommendation from the medical community was that he have another amputation that would have left him bedbound and dependent upon everybody, and that is not what he wanted. So again, he knew what he wanted, he made his plan, and we wanted to support him in that. And when hospice was appropriate, that was our intent. So we were moving up here on July 1st, 2018. He was going to be coming to live with us, and 6 days before we moved in, the facility had gotten him on hospice.
Unfortunately, a high pain management regimen was put into place, and he passed away on June 29th, 3 days before we moved into our home, but about 3 days after he went on hospice. That was really what made us realize that, first, we were just reeling with regret and we don't want anybody else to ever suffer what we were enduring. So we decided things should be different. They should be more like our first experience. We were trying to figure out what was different. 15 years had passed. We wondered, did we sign up for the wrong program? What was different?
It was massive regret when you think you've got a plan and it just doesn't happen. And he died alone because my wife was up here visiting him the day after he went on hospice. And the doctor said, well, yeah, he's been drugged out the whole day, but come back tomorrow. We'll try and change that plan. So go ahead and get home and get some sleep.
Well, so the longer version of that is when I got here, my sister had been here as well, and he was asleep, and so asleep, we couldn't even wake him up. And when we asked the nurses, they said he must have had a bad night. When he finally woke up about 10 hours after his medication was administered, I asked him, and he didn't remember having anything bad happen. He remembered them coming in and giving him his medications, and then he fell asleep, and the next thing, I was there, and I was there with some of my kids. I was trying to figure out what was going on, but being unfamiliar with what my rights were, we were in a facility. I didn't know that I could come out and say, oh, I want his medication profile. I want to know what is happening. I want to know why he was administered meds. I didn't know what I was allowed to say and what I wasn't allowed to say. So while I was trying to figure it all out, prior to figuring it all out, my dad actually spent some time with us after he woke up and was having a really incredibly wonderful day. I mean, we were laughing. He was telling fibs about me, saying I was a difficult teenager, which I wasn't. I'm here to tell you I wasn't. I was a great teenager. But he was telling my kids how hard I was, and we were laughing about it and enjoying the day. And I stepped out to take a phone call because I couldn't get good reception in his room when my 13-year-old came out and said, Mom, just after you left, a nurse came in and gave him more medications, and he's asleep again. And I came running back in and said, why did you do that? And she said, I'm just following protocol. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So trying to figure out what happened, 10:30 at night comes, the doctor says to me, go home, get a good night's sleep. He's fine. He's really stable. Everything's okay. And at 2:30 in the morning after the next dose, he passed away. So while we're trying to deal with what happened, what we should have done, that was when we discovered there are differences between companies, home health companies and hospice companies, and just every company to company. They're very, very different. What
their goals are versus your goals. And that's the part that you need to be involved in. Don't be afraid to talk to anybody and ask questions about, what care you can expect and the care you want to have, and see if you can come up with that best solution. So we have really enjoyed having this opportunity to share our stories. And there's a lot more that we can say, but I think we're running a little out of time. So Kyle, we really appreciate this opportunity to be involved in your program, Living Your Best Life.
Wherever you're from, though, don't be afraid. Give us a call. We're happy to help. We have loved what we're doing, and we would love to help anyone from here to Zimbabwe.
Yeah, our telephone number, 435-477-6999. Really easy number to remember. But if you have questions about care that you're receiving, your parents are receiving, and you just want some advice, we'd be more than happy to help you.
That is awesome. Again, you've opened up my understanding and my idea of what services are available and end of life care really can be and looks like. And thank you. I appreciate that. You mentioned your phone number. While we're thinking about it, say that one more time for us.
The phone number is 435 area code, and then the number. What is it?
477-6999.
It's 477 on the left and 6999 on the right. Easiest number to remember.
Awesome. Love it. Do you have a website?
pathwayhospicecare.com.
Okay.
Wonderful. And we would love to hear from people. Our email address is richard@pathwayhospicecare.com, and the easier one, Kaylie, Kaylie, at Pathway Hospice Care. We would love to give people as much information as possible and help them
be their own best medical advocates. We just want to help. So give us a call.
Well, we can definitely see that and feel that sincerity. So thank you. We have a couple of questions, and I want to at least jump into at least a couple of them. Boy, you guys covered a lot of things, and thank you. Great information. Jumping back a little bit to medication audits. The question is, how often do you recommend that you get a medication audit?
Well, okay, so that's a great question. And as far as the individual goes, they should be constantly aware of what is going on with their medications. If they change, okay, then it makes sense to make sure you assess all the other medications you have with any medication a doctor offers. But a medication either is going to solve a problem and that makes it curative, or it's palliative and it's going to be long term. And you should know what that plan is and how it's affecting you. Is it doing the job or not?
And remember, when you get a medication, one of your questions should be, how long can I expect to be on this medication? When do I expect to be able to end this medication? Make yourself that little note. And if it's 6 months, at the 6-month period, remind your doctor. Here's where we're at. You said about 6 months. Here's where I'm at. Remember, most medications were intended for a short term, either to address a symptom or to fix a problem. And at the point that you don't need it anymore, you need to stop taking it.
Right. And you should know what that drug is supposed to do for you and make sure that it's doing that. If it's a symptom that you can track, then track that. If it's supposed to keep your blood pressure down, track your blood pressure. And at the point that it's not working or something changes, that's a good time to talk to your doctor about that. But your doctor is not going to be aware of those changes until he happens to ask that question. You can be aware and help him get better information.
You might forget you were on a blood pressure medicine, but your blood pressure is really good when you come into the office.
Right.
The message that I keep hearing that's just ringing in my ears, and you've expressed it so well, is to be your own best advocate and, understand and questions are your friend. And
right.
I know that sometimes that can be pretty intimidating. We walk into a room and someone, a man or a woman, walks in with a lab coat and they've got clipboards and they're busy and they're trying to get to the next thing. And sometimes that's hard to do, but we need to recognize and realize that it is our healthcare. And again, that questions are our friends.
And if you can ask those questions early, because doctors will refer to many of the questions patients will ask as doorknob questions. And that is, they go through the entire 15 minutes and as they're grabbing the door, then they say, oh yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
They don't have time. So they say, next time we meet, we'll
That's
go
right.
through those questions.
So put your questions out there early. Your doctor can do a physical exam while he's talking to you, but engage him and make sure that the questions you have get answered while you're there and start early. Your doctor's not going to be offended that you're interested in your own healthcare.
Exactly, right? I think that, again, that's the message that's coming through to me. I appreciate that. A couple of other questions. Talking now about hospice care. The question is, how do you assess whether or not a family is ready for hospice services?
All right, so there's a lot of different answers to that question. For the doctor, a doctor can make an assessment based on very specific things. But what we're trying to do is educate the community to realize that there are things that we can all notice that make somebody eligible for hospice. And that is just the way they live their life. The phrase, there's a medical term called ADLs, activities of daily life. When we aren't able to do that as well, when we start noticing declines, that would be a good time to consider whether having hospice, having people come into my home and help me with those daily activities or help me accomplish things that I can't accomplish on my own, instead of going to a hospital to deal with a medical condition or waiting 3 to 6 months to see a doctor. A hospice, if you're on a hospice program, we actually bring the hospital to the home, and that's great. So the decision, it doesn't have to be a complete medical one. Everybody has the ability to refer themselves to hospice.
Remember, you really should know far in advance. If you're the child of, parents who are aging, find out in advance. My dad has congestive heart failure. My mom has a kidney disease. What is the point that they're eligible? Because really, as soon as they're eligible is when you want to take advantage of that program. I think it's important for people to realize that at least here in America, you're eligible when you have a terminal illness in its late stage. It doesn't mean that you're dying. In fact, you should use it well before you're actively dying, right? So if you see your mom and dad struggling, or if you are a couple and you're struggling to take care of your loved one, find out now. Find out when you can take advantage of the program. And do your research while you feel healthy enough to do your research to find out who's going to give you what, so that you choose, not just the doctor said I should go here. Which brings up a point. Recently, I had somebody say, talk to us about what we were going to do. And then They were on home health, and the nurse said, "Oh, we all do the same thing." Nope, we don't. We don't all do the same thing. That's exactly why we're here. So do your research. Not everybody offers the same thing.
And it's an important thing to understand that your doctor is not comfortable talking about hospice either. Okay. Because when the doctor has to bring that up, he knows that the people who he's talking to are not going to like that word because they don't have the same understanding that we personally do. And so it's not a conversation they want to have, and they will put that off as long as possible. So my recommendation for everybody who's listening is, when is a good time to talk to your doctor about hospice?
Now.
The very next time you see him. Not that you need it today,
Right.
but if you can get past that uncomfortable first conversation about hospice, if you can get your doctor to put in his notes, in his narrative, well, they are willing to consider hospice. Maybe it's not going to be an uncomfortable conversation for me when that time comes. If you can get that on the record, then it's going to be better. So talk to your doctor, find out what he thinks hospice is, tell him what you would like hospice to be, and then plan on something that's going to be most effective for what you want.
Great advice. Again, it's just communication, right? It's all about communication. It's all about questions. It's all about taking charge of the things that are important to you. Just, again, great advice. I love it. One more question I want to throw out there. We've kind of talked about things from an umbrella standpoint, and you shared some great specific stories. We've talked about advocating. We've talked about questions. This is kind of a very specific thing. Your advice on this: if your doctor tells you there's nothing more that can be done, that difficult conversation that none of us look forward to hearing or having, what is the next step? What do you do as soon as you hear those words?
Hopefully you're already on hospice.
Yeah. Because what the doctor is really saying is, there's nothing more medically that I can do. That doesn't mean that there's nothing that you can do. It's just that the doctor doesn't have anything more that he can add. And so for us, it's really important to understand that we want to take control of the things we can control and not let the things we can't control determine our lives. Once that disease or that illness becomes something that we no longer can control, then to live our best life, we should probably be focusing on those things that we can't control. Getting that bucket list out of the way, enjoying life, finding out what our palliative is. And this is the phrase that we've been using. What is your palliative? And everybody should really think about what are the things that make them happy, because we can make recommendations. Pet therapy is palliative for those people who like dogs, but that doesn't mean it's good for everybody.
Right.
So it's, what is your palliative? Come up with those things and realize what's really important to make those detailed
What's
answers.
what's on your bucket list and what's going to make your life better. And here's something that we all have to remember. You might be on home health, but if you're with a company that is home health and hospice, at the point that you're eligible for hospice, the company's responsibilities of things that they have to cover at 100% goes up. Your co-pays and responsibilities go down. So if you just think about it logically, at home health, it's considered fee for service. Everything that is done, the company is paid for. When you are eligible for hospice and you make that transition, the company's responsible for most of it. And you no longer have co-pays. That's supposed to be the time in your life that you can breathe easy and go, I don't have to qualify to keep the physical therapist coming anymore. I don't have to worry about the pharmaceuticals that are related to my terminal illness anymore. I don't have to, if I have questions, I can call somebody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So your stresses go down. The company's stresses go up. If you know that when you transition from home health to hospice, that your stresses go down, but the companies go up, when do you think is the best time to find out when you're eligible? It's probably not in the company's best interest to tell you right away.
Yeah, if I was going to, draw an analogy between that, it would be the difference between a bus ride and a full cruise, prepaid cruise. Yes, you'll get to the same place using home health, but the amenities are very limited. That it's just the bare minimum that's needed. Whereas when it's a full service cruise ship, it's going to be a much better ride, but the cost is different, and the company is going to make that decision. So if they can keep you on the bus, it doesn't cost them very much. Yeah. When they move you over to hospice, then they have to contribute a lot more. So
know when you're eligible for the limo ride.
Yeah, and call us and find out how good hospice can be. It's a great experience, and hopefully it's one that everybody has an opportunity to do. I know it's still tied to that end of life, which we all are going to experience at some point. So it's whether you're really going to enjoy that time that you have at the end or you're not going to enjoy it. That's the choice that we have.
Yeah. And if you have that choice, I think we all want to choose the let's enjoy it a little bit more, right?
Let's get things off the bucket list and let's resolve some issues so we don't have those regrets, not only for the patient, but for the family and the caregiver. And that's where, again, hospice really focuses on supporting the family and the caregiver too, to make sure that they have a good experience.
And I'll tell you, as we continue to evolve in this business, there is so much pleasure. I mean, we look at our palliative provision almost like the portion of the cruise director where we get to help you orchestrate and check things off of your bucket list. We hope help families do videos for life end memories, to have your loved ones share their stories on record. I mean, we really try and do a lot. You should be asking your company what they're going to do for you and ask them to do some of those things for you. Medicare expects a healthy, robust palliative portion to go back to the patient. Are you getting all that you should be getting, that you deserve? Are you getting everything that Medicare has intended you to receive?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that every hospice company meets the Medicare standard.
Minimum, you have to.
There's a minimum standard that Medicare has, and every company has to meet that. But most of them just try and figure out how close they have to be to that. But there's so much above what the Medicare minimum is, whether that's the type of care that you get, the number of visits you get, the alternative options that are available to you. If all you're getting is a nurse every 2 weeks and CNAs a couple, 3 times a week, and they say, well, yes, we've satisfied the minimum, and you did meet with a social worker and you had a chaplain, and that's it, that's all we offer, then that's a bus ride. There's no question.
There's more available.
There is so much more.
That being said, the nurses would not be in this industry 99% of the time if they weren't truly compassionate and loving. It's not their fault that the company they work for is limiting what they're allowed to provide. So even though you might have this really fabulous nurse, this is about you, and all the nurses are going to be fabulous.
Yeah, wonderful. Again, incredible advice, great things to think about. As you mentioned, we've kind of used up our time. One more time, share that phone number in case people have just specific questions they want to check in with you.
435-477-6999.
That's it.
And we look forward to taking those calls and answering questions and seeing if we can point you in the direction of options that may be available to you, alternative therapies or anything else.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. We really do want to answer questions, so feel free to give us a call.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise. And we wish you all the best going forward in this journey that you are on as well, providing this wonderful service. There's got to be a lot of satisfaction there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We also want to thank each of you for joining us today. If you enjoyed the webinar today, please let your friends know about the Living Your Best Life webinar series. You can find information on this series at our website, which is seniorgames.net. And of course, you can watch this as well as the previous episodes right there on the website as well. This one will be available in just a couple of days. Again, seniorgames.net. Be sure that you join us next month where we visit with Doug Harding as he talks about getting the cybersecurity you deserve, or how to deserve the cybersecurity that you really want. This webinar will take place on July 22nd at 11 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And until we meet again, get out there and live your best life. Thanks, everyone.